Chapter 1. The Crimson Dawn, the Arizona Territory. 1885. Sarah Mitchell pressed her back against the rough bark of the cottonwood tree, her wrists burning from the coarse rope that bound her. The crimson sun painted the desert landscape in shades of blood and gold, a cruel beauty that mocked her desperate situation. 23 years old, with auburn hair now matted with dirt and tears, she had never imagined her journey west would end like this. Please, she whispered to the empty desert, her voice cracked and hoarse. Someone ... anyone. The memory of the attack 3 days ago played endlessly in her mind. The wagon train had been traveling from Tucson to the newly established settlement of Willowbrook, where Sarah was meant to teach at the small schoolhouse. She had been full of hope then, eager to start her new life on the frontier, carrying letters of recommendation and a small trunk of books that represented her dreams of educating children in the wild territories. But the bandits had come at dawn, not Apache, as she had initially feared, but a ruthless gang of white men, led by a scarred brute named Harlan Cross. They had killed the wagon master and his men without mercy, taken what supplies they could carry, and left her bound to this tree to die slowly under the merciless desert sun. A pretty little schoolmarm, Cross had sneered, his breath reeking of whiskey and cruelty. Too bad we can't take you with us. Apache territory ahead, and we travel light. He had laughed as he tied the final knot. Maybe the savages will find you first. Might be more merciful than the vultures. Now, as the sun climbed higher, Sarah felt her strength ebbing away. Her lips were cracked, her throat felt like sandpaper, and her vision blurred occasionally. The rope around her wrists had cut deep, enough to draw blood, which had dried in dark stains on her torn blue dress. She had tried everything to free herself, but the knots were tight and positioned where she couldn't reach them properly. A sound in the distance made her lift her head. Hoofbeats. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she strained to listen. One horse, moving at a steady pace. Could it be rescued, or had Cross returned to finish what he started? The rider appeared through the heat shimmer like a mirage made real. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't Cross or any of his men. The figure approaching was an Apache warrior, his long black hair flowing behind him as he rode a spotted pinto horse. He wore traditional clothing mixed with some pieces of white man's gear buckskin leggings, a cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. Sarah's heart hammered with a different kind of fear now. She had heard the stories, the warnings about Apache warriors. The newspapers back east painted them as savage killers. But as the rider drew closer, she found herself studying his face with desperate hope rather than terror. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with strong features and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. There was something in his bearing that spoke of intelligence and control, not the wild savagery she had been taught to expect. The warrior Aishan, though she didn't know his name, yet stopped his horse about 20 feet away and studied her. For a long moment, Sarah held her breath, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. Her knowledge of Apache customs was limited to frightening stories and army reports, none of which had prepared her for this moment. Water, she finally managed to whisper, the word barely audible. Please. Aishan dismounted in one fluid motion, his moccasined feet silent on the desert floor. He approached cautiously, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When he was close enough, Sarah could see the intelligence in his gaze, the way he assessed her condition with what seemed like concern. He knelt beside her, and Sarah caught a scent of sage and leather. His hands moved to examine the ropes binding her wrists, and she noticed his fingers were long and skilled, with small scars that spoke of a life lived close to danger. White men did this? He asked in accented but clear English, his voice lower and gentler than she had expected. Sarah nodded, tears of relief springing to her eyes. 3 days ago, bandits say they killed everyone else and left me to die. Aishan's expression darkened as he took in the full extent of her situation. Without another word, he drew a sharp knife from his belt. Sarah tensed instinctively, but he simply cut through the ropes with quick, efficient strokes. The moment her hands were free, Sarah collapsed forward, her legs unable to support her weight. Strong arms caught her before she could hit the ground. Easy, Aishan murmured, helping her lean back against the tree. You are hurt, weak. He moved to his horse and returned with a water skin, holding it to her lips carefully. Slow, he instructed, little at a time, or you will be sick. The water was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but Aishan controlled the flow, making sure she didn't drink too much too quickly. As her immediate thirst was quenched, she found herself looking into his eyes with something approaching gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. I thought I was going to die here. Aishan studied her face for a moment, then glanced at the surrounding desert. This is Apache land, he said quietly. Why do you travel here? I was going to Willowbrook to teach at the school there. Sarah's voice was stronger now, though still hoarse. My name is Sarah Mitchell. Sarah, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. I am Aishan, and you cannot go to Not now. Why not? Fear crept back into her voice. Is it gone? Aishan's expression was grave. There is fighting. The army, my people. It is not safe for anyone, especially a white woman alone. Sarah felt the last of her hopes crumble. She had no money, No supplies, no way to get home, and now no destination. Then what am I supposed to do? She asked, hating the way her voice broke. Aishan was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Sarah had no way of knowing that he was fighting an internal battle that went against everything his people had taught him about white settlers, but something in her eyes, some quality of strength beneath the fear, made him pause. You cannot travel alone, he said finally, and I cannot leave you here to die. Sarah's heart hammered as she realized what he might be suggesting. What are you saying? My people have a camp 2 days' ride from here. You will come with me. You will be safe until we can decide what to do with you. The offer was beyond anything Sarah had dared hope for, but it also terrified her. To go willingly into an Apache camp seemed like madness. Yet what choice did she have? Die here in the desert, or take a chance on the warrior who had already saved her life? Why? She asked quietly. Why would you help me? Aishan stood and walked a few paces away, his back to her. When he turned around, his expression was unreadable. Because leaving you here to die would make me the savage your people think I am, and I am not that man. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of the honor in his words. I'll come with you, she said. I don't have any choice. But, thank you, for my life. Aisha nodded once, then moved to help her to her feet. Can you ride? Sarah tested her legs, finding them shaky but functional. I think so. I'm not very good at it, but I can try. You will ride with me, Aishan decided. Safer that way. As he helped her toward his horse, Sarah caught sight of something glinting. In the dirt near the tree, she bent down and picked up a small silver locket, the only thing of value she had left. Inside was a photograph of her parents, long dead, and a lock of her mother's hair. Somehow, it had survived the attack, when everything else had been taken. This is important to you, Aishan observed, watching her clutch the locket. It's all I have left of my family, Sarah said softly. My parents died when I was 16. This and my teaching were all I had. Aishan helped her mount behind him, and Sarah had to fight back a wave of dizziness as they started moving. The desert landscape began to blur past them, and she found herself grateful for the solid warmth of Aishan's back against her cheek. What will your people think? She asked after they had ridden for a while. About you bringing me to the camp. They will not be pleased, Aishan admitted. There is much anger, much pain. White soldiers have done terrible things to our people, but my grandmother is wise, and she leads the women. If she accepts you, others will follow. Sarah absorbed this information, trying to prepare herself for what lay ahead. What if she doesn't accept me? Aishan was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke. Then I will find another way to keep you safe. I have given my word. As they rode deeper into Apache territory, Sarah found herself studying the man who had saved her life. There was something about him that contradicted everything she had been taught about his people. He was gentle when he could have been harsh, thoughtful when he could have been impulsive, and he had risked potential trouble with his own people to save a stranger. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, when Aishan finally called a halt. They had reached a small canyon with a spring and some shelter from the wind. We will rest here tonight, he said, helping her down from the horse. Tomorrow we reach the camp. Sarah sank gratefully to the ground, her body aching from the long ride. Aishan busied himself making a small fire and preparing a simple meal from supplies in his saddlebags. As the flames flickered to life, Sarah found herself watching his face in the firelight. Why did you learn English? She asked softly. Aishan looked up from the fire. My father thought it was important. He said we must understand our enemies to survive them, but also, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Not all white people are enemies. Some are just, people like you. Sarah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire spread through her chest. I never thought about it that way. I never thought about Apache people as people, just as what the newspapers said. And what did the newspapers say? Sarah looked down at her hands, ashamed. Terrible things. That you were all killers and savages. That you stole children and tortured prisoners. She looked up at him. But you're not like that at all. Aishan's smile was sad. Some of my people have done terrible things, just as some of your people have done terrible things. War makes monsters of everyone, Sarah. The question is whether we choose to remain monsters when the war is over. They shared a simple meal of dried meat and water, and as the night deepened, Sarah found herself talking to Aishan about her life before the attack. She told him about her parents, about her dream of teaching, about the books she had lost in the attack. You can read? Aishan asked, genuine interest in his voice. Yes, and right. I had hoped to start a school, to teach children. Sarah's voice was wistful. It seems foolish now. It is not foolish, Aishan said firmly. Knowledge is power. My grandmother says that the white man's greatest weapon is not his guns, but his writing. If our children could read and write like yours do, he trailed off, but Sarah understood. You want your people to have schools too. I want my people to survive, Aishan corrected. And to survive, we must change. But change without losing who we are. As the fire died down to embers, Sarah wrapped herself in the blanket Aishan had given her and lay down on the soft sand, For the first time in 3 days, she felt safe. But more than that, she felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears. But tonight, under the vast desert sky, she had found something precious, a glimpse of the humanity that could exist between two people from different worlds. Chapter 2. The test of trust. The Apache camp materialized from the desert landscape like something from a dream. Hidden in a box canyon with high red walls and a clear stream running through its center, it was larger than Sarah had imagined. Dozens of traditional wickiups dotted the canyon floor, their brush and hide coverings blending seamlessly with the natural surroundings. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the sound of children's laughter echoed off the canyon walls. But as Aishan guided his horse through the camp, the laughter died away. Sarah felt dozens of eyes upon her, and the weight of their stares made her want to shrink into invisibility. Women stopped their work to watch her pass, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. Warriors emerged from their shelters, hands resting casually on their weapons. Children peered out from behind their mothers' skirts with wide, frightened eyes. "Stay close to me," Aishan murmured. "Do not speak unless spoken to, and whatever happens, do not show fear." Sarah nodded, though her heart was hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She had spent the entire ride to the camp trying to prepare herself for this moment, but the reality was more overwhelming than she had imagined. They stopped before the largest wickiup, where an elderly woman sat grinding corn on a mat. She was perhaps 60 years old, with silver-streaked hair braided with colorful beads, and a face that spoke of wisdom earned through hardship. Her dark eyes were sharp and assessing as she looked up at the approaching riders. "Grandmother," I said respectfully in Apache, then switched to English. "This is Sarah Mitchell, the woman I told you about in my message." The elderly woman on which Sarah would learn set down her grinding stone and stood slowly. She was shorter than Sarah, but carried herself with unmistakable authority. Her eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made the young woman want to look away, but she remembered Akin's advice about not showing fear. "So Nolnish said in heavily accented English, "you are the white woman my grandson found dying in the desert." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm grateful to him for saving my life." Nolnish walked slowly around Sarah, studying her like a horse trader examining a potential purchase. "You are thin, weak. What use are you to us?" Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "I can teach, I can read and write. I can help with ... with whatever needs to be done." "Teach?" Nolnish's eyebrows rose. "You would teach Apache children the white man's ways. Make them forget their own people." "No," Sarah said firmly, surprising herself with her certainty. "I would teach them to read and write so they could learn about both worlds, so they could choose their own path." A murmur ran through the crowd that had gathered to watch this exchange. Sarah caught fragments of Apache conversation, the tone ranging from skeptical to intrigued. She kept her eyes focused on Nolnish, sensing that this moment would determine her fate. "You speak boldly for someone who depends on our mercy," Nolnish observed. "Do you know what white soldiers did to our people at Skeleton Canyon last month?" Sarah's heart sank. She had heard rumors of violence, but she had no idea about specific incidents. "No, ma'am, I don't know anything about that." 23 of our people died, women, children, cut down like animals. Nolnish's voice was cold and hard. "And you expect us to welcome you with open arms?" "I don't expect anything," Sarah said quietly. "I only ask for a chance to prove that not all white people are your enemies, just as Aishan proved to me that not all Apache are mine." Nolnish's eyes flickered with something that might have been approval, but her expression remained stern. "We will see." "Aishan says you were left to die by your own people. Is this true?" Sarah nodded, the memory still painful. "They weren't my people. They were bandits, killers. They murdered everyone in our wagon train and left me tied to a tree, to die. And yet you call us savages," said a voice from the crowd. Sarah turned to see a young warrior pushing through the gathered people. He was perhaps 25, with elaborate tattoos on his arms and a face twisted with anger. "Your people kill women and children and call it war. We defend ourselves and are called monsters," Chado Nolnish said sharply. "You will show respect." But Chado was beyond listening. "Why should we help her, grandmother? She is white. They are all the same. They take our land, kill our people, and then expect us to be grateful for their scraps." Sarah felt the mood of the crowd shifting, the curiosity turning to hostility. She looked at Aishan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. This was her test, she realized. Not just Nolnish's test, but the test of the entire community. "You're right," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the canyon. "My people have done terrible things to yours, things I can't excuse or explain away. But I'm not asking you to forget that. I'm asking you to judge me by my actions, not by the color of my skin." Chado laughed bitterly. "Actions? What actions? You have done nothing but bring trouble to our camp." "Then let me do something," Sarah said, stepping forward. "Let me prove that I'm worth the trouble. Give me a chance to earn my place here." "And if you fail?" Chado challenged. "If you prove to be as useless as I believe." Sarah lifted her chin. "Then I'll leave. I'll walk out into the desert and you'll never see me again." The crowd fell silent. Even Chato seemed taken aback by her offer. Nulnish studied Sarah for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well, you will be tested. For 1 moon, you will live as we live, work as we work. If you prove yourself useful, you may stay. If not, ... double quotes. She shrugged. The desert is vast. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and terror. She had bought herself time, but at what cost? She had no idea how to live in an Apache camp, no understanding of their customs or expectations. But she had no choice now. Thank you, she said simply. I won't disappoint you. Nulnish assigned Sarah to work with Itza, a woman in her 30s who was skilled in basket weaving and hide preparation. Itza was neither friendly nor hostile, simply practical. She showed Sarah to a small space behind her wickiup where she could sleep and gave her basic instructions about camp life. You will rise with the sun, Itza explained in careful English. Help prepare the morning meal. Then you work with the other women. We will see how quick you learn. Sarah's first day was a disaster. She had never worked with her hands the way these women did, had never processed animal hides or woven baskets from willow and pine needles. Her fingers were clumsy, her technique poor. By midday she had ruined 2 basket starts and accidentally torn a hole in a hide that Itza had spent hours preparing. City woman, muttered Ciala, another woman in the group, as Sarah struggled with her 3rd basket attempt. Soft hands, soft mind. Sarah's cheeks burned with shame, but she kept working. By evening, her fingers were bleeding, and her back ached. But she had managed to complete her first small basket. It was lopsided and ugly, but it was finished. Better, Itza said grudgingly. Tomorrow, you try again. That night, Sarah lay on her thin blanket and stared up at the stars. Her body ached in ways she had never experienced, and she felt completely out of place. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see the approval in Nulnish's eyes when she had accepted the challenge. The next day was marginally better. Her fingers remembered some of the movements, and her basket was less obviously defective. But it was the 3rd day that brought her real test. A group of children had gathered to watch the women work. Their curiosity about the white woman overcoming their initial shyness, Sarah found herself smiling at them, making faces that made them giggle. When one of the older boys hurt his hand on a sharp piece of wood, Sarah instinctively moved to help him. Here, let me see, she said gently, examining the small cut. She cleaned it with water and tore a strip from her already tattered skirt to bind it. As she worked, she began to tell the children a story about a brave rabbit who outsmarted a coyote, using gestures and simple words to help them understand. The children were entranced. Even the adults working nearby found themselves listening to Sarah's animated tale. When she finished, the children begged for another story, and Sarah found herself drawing pictures in the dirt to illustrate her words. You are good with children, Itza observed that evening. They like you. I've always loved children, Sarah admitted. That's why I wanted to teach. Perhaps you can teach them white man's words, Itza suggested. Some think it would be useful to know. Sarah's heart leaped at the possibility. I would love to if it's allowed. Over the following days, Sarah found her rhythm in the camp. Her basket weaving improved dramatically, and she began to help with other tasks: cooking, tending the fires, caring for the children. She learned Apache words and phrases, and in return, she taught English to anyone who was interested. But it was her relationship with Aishan that caused the most whispers. He would visit her workplace in the evenings, bringing her small gifts: a better blanket, a pair of moccasins, wildflowers from the desert. They would sit by the stream and talk, sharing stories of their different worlds. Why do you do this? Sarah asked one evening as they watched the stars emerge. Help me, your people don't all approve. Aishan was quiet for a long moment. My father used to say that the strongest person is not the one who wins every fight, but the one who knows which fights are worth winning. Saving you ... It felt like a fight worth winning. Sarah turned to look at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her heart race. And now I think perhaps I was saving myself as much as you. Before Sarah could respond, Chato's voice cut through the evening air. How touching. The white woman has bewitched our best warrior. Sarah and Aishan both turned to see Chato approaching, his face dark with anger. Behind him were several other young warriors, their expressions equally hostile. She does not belong here, Chato continued. She is a spy, sent to learn our ways so her people can destroy us more That's not true, Sarah said, rising to her feet. I have no one to spy for. My wagon train was attacked by bandits, not soldiers. You expect us to believe that, Chato sneered. Convenient that you should be the only survivor, that you should be found by Aishan alone. Enough, Aishan said, his voice dangerously quiet. You question my word? I question your judgment, Chato replied. You are blinded by her pale skin and strange ways. She will bring disaster to our people. The confrontation was attracting attention from the rest of the camp. Sarah could see people emerging from their wickiups, drawn by the raised voices. She realized that this moment would determine not just her fate, but possibly Aishan's as well. If you believe I'm a spy, she said clearly, then test me. Ask me anything about soldier movements, about army plans. I know nothing because I am nothing more than what I claim to be, a teacher who lost everything. Chato's eyes narrowed. Words are easy. Anyone can lie. Then what would convince you? Sarah challenged. What proof would you accept? Blood, Chato said simply. Prove your loyalty with blood. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah felt her heart hammering, but she kept her voice steady. What do you mean? The bandits who killed your people and left you to die? You know their leader's name? You know where they might be found. Help us hunt them down, and perhaps I will believe you are truly one of us. Sarah's mind raced. She did know about Harlan Cross and his gang, knew they had been heading toward the mining camps near Tombstone. But leading Apache warriors against white criminals? It could start a war. I can't, she said quietly. Not because I'm loyal to them, but because it would give the army an excuse to attack you. They would say you were raiding white settlements. So, you admit it, Chato said triumphantly. You care more about protecting your people than helping ours. They're not my people, Sarah shot back, her composure finally cracking. They murdered everyone I was traveling with. They left me to die, but I won't be responsible for starting a war that will get more innocent people killed. The crowd was murmuring now, some in apparent approval, others in disappointment. Sarah looked at Aishan, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. There is wisdom in her words, said a voice from the crowd. Everyone turned to see Nell, approaching her walking stick tapping against the ground. She thinks like a leader, not like someone hungry for revenge. Grandmother, Chato protested, she refuses to help us. She refuses to help us make a mistake. Nolnish corrected. There is a difference. She looked at Sarah with something approaching respect. You have been here 2 weeks. In that time, you have learned our ways, helped our children, and earned your place through work, not through violence. That is worth more than blood. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Then we'll make a new place, Sarah said with sudden conviction. We'll find a way to bridge both worlds. Aishan looked at her, his expression serious. Do you truly believe that's possible? I have to, Sarah replied. Because if it's not, then, everything we've built here, everything we've learned about each other, will be lost. The next morning brought unexpected visitors, but not soldiers this time. A small group of Apache from another band had arrived during the night, led by a war chief named Geronimo. Sarah had heard the name whispered with equal parts respect and fear, and now she understood why. Even at rest, Geronimo radiated a kind of contained violence that made the air around him seem to crackle with tension. He was older than Sarah had expected, perhaps 50, with graying hair and scars that told stories of countless battles. His eyes were like flint, hard and unforgiving. So, he said when he was introduced to Sarah, you are the white woman who thinks she can become Apache. I am Sarah, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. And I don't think I can become Apache. I think I can become something new, someone who belongs to both worlds, but is owned by neither. Geronimo studied her for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed, spoken like a true warrior. I see why Isan prizes you. The war chief had come to discuss the growing pressure from the army, the increasing restrictions on Apache movement, and the grim reality that their traditional way of life was coming to an end. His solution was characteristic: fight until the end, take as many enemies as possible with them, and die free rather than live as prisoners. The reservation is death, he declared to the assembled leaders. Slow death, but death nonetheless. Better to die as warriors than to waste away as beggars. And what of the women and children? Nolnish asked. What of the future of our people? If we do not fight, there will be no future, Geronimo replied. Sarah listened to the debate with growing alarm. She could see the appeal of Geronimo's position. It was clean, noble, and utterly hopeless. But she could also see the wisdom in Nolnish's concern for the non-combatants, the people who would suffer most in any war. May I speak? She asked quietly. The conversation stopped, and Sarah found herself the focus of some very intense attention. Geronimo's eyes were particularly penetrating, as if he were trying to see into her soul. You have something to say, white woman? He asked. I have a question, Sarah said. What if there was a third option? What if you didn't have to choose between the reservation and war? There is no third option, Chato said dismissively. The white man will not rest until we are all dead or caged. Not all white men, Sarah replied. I have been thinking about this since the lieutenant's visit. What if we could find allies? People who believe in justice, and the right of all people to live free. Geronimo's expression was skeptical. And where would we find these magical allies? In the newspapers, Sarah said, warming to her theme. In the churches, in the schools. Back east, there are people who would be horrified if they knew what was really happening out here. People who believe in the principles America was founded on. Pretty words, Geronimo said. But words do not stop bullets. No, Sarah agreed, but they can change minds. And changed minds can change policies. She looked around the circle of leaders, seeing various degrees of interest and skepticism. Let me write letters. Let me tell the true story of what's happening here. Not the army's version, not the newspaper's version, but the truth. If enough people knew, if enough people cared, you would risk your life for this. Nolnish asked. Sarah nodded. I would risk everything. Because this is my home now, and these are my people. I can't stand by and watch them be destroyed. Geronimo was quiet for a long moment, his flint-hard eyes studying Sarah's face. Finally, he spoke. You have courage, white woman. Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. Very well, write your letters. But understand if this fails. If your people ignore your words, then we fight. And when we fight, we die. All of us. I understand, Sarah said solemnly, and I accept the responsibility. Over the next week, Sarah worked feverishly on her letters. She wrote 2 newspaper editors, 2 senators, 2 church leaders, to anyone she could think of who might have influence. She told the story of the Apache people. She had come to know their dignity, their love for their children, their deep connection to the land. She described the impossible choice they faced and the injustice of forcing a free people onto reservations. But, most importantly, she wrote about the possibility of coexistence, of finding a way for Apache and white settlers to live together in peace. She drew on her own experience, her transformation from fearful outsider to beloved community member, as proof that understanding was possible. Aishan helped her with the letters, providing details about Apache history and culture that she might not have known. As they worked together in the evenings, Sarah became increasingly aware of the depth of his knowledge, the careful way he chose his words. You should be the one writing these letters, she said one night, after they had finished another draft. You understand your people's situation better than I ever could. But I am Apache, Aishan replied. They would not listen to me. They would see only a savage trying to escape justice. But you are one of them who has chosen to become one. Of us your words carry weight, mine never could. Sarah looked at him in the firelight, seeing the sadness in his eyes. It's not fair. You're more educated than most of the men in Congress, but they'll never give you the chance to prove it. Fairness is a luxury we cannot afford, Aishan said. Quietly, we must use whatever weapons we have, even if they are not the weapons we would choose. As the 30-day deadline approached, Sarah's letters began to bear fruit. Responses started arriving, some supportive, some hostile, but all indicating that her words were being read and discussed. A sympathetic editor in San Francisco published her account of life with the Apache, and it was reprinted in newspapers across the country. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Some readers were outraged that a white woman would defend savages against her own people. Others were moved by her description of Apache family life and questioned the government's policy of forced relocation. But it was a letter from an unexpected source that gave Sarah the most hope. Senator Henry Dawes of Massachusetts, chairman of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, wrote to say that he was intrigued by her suggestions and would like to meet with Apache representatives to discuss alternatives to the current policy. It's working, Sarah told Aishan excitedly. People are listening. They're asking questions. Perhaps, Aishan said, but his expression was troubled. But will they listen quickly enough? The soldiers will return soon, and I do not think they will be as patient as Lieutenant Morrison. His words proved prophetic. 2 days before the deadline, scouts brought word that a much larger force was approaching 3 companies of cavalry and a battery of artillery. This was not a delegation come to negotiate. This was an army come to enforce the government's will. The camp erupted in activity as preparations were made for either fight or flight. Weapons were cleaned and checked, supplies were packed, and the women and children were readied for whatever might come. Sarah found herself in the strange position of being both insider and outsider, Apache by choice but white by birth. As the soldiers approached, she faced the ultimate test of her loyalty. Would she stand with her adopted people against her birth people, even if it meant death? The answer came to her with surprising clarity. She had found her home, her purpose, her love among the Apache. Whatever happened next, she would face it as one of them. Chapter 4. The choice that changes everything. The morning of the soldiers' return dawned gray and cold, with clouds hanging low over the canyon like a shroud. Sarah stood with the other women on the rim, watching the dust cloud that marked the approach of the army. 3 companies of cavalry, just as the scouts had reported, with supply wagons and artillery pieces. This was not the small patrol that had visited before. This was a force prepared for war. It is time, Nulnish said quietly, her weathered hands gripping her walking stick. The choice Sarah spoke of is here. Do not thank me yet, Nulnish said. Your real test is still to come. Winter approaches, and with it, the time when the army will try to force us onto the reservation. When that time comes, you will have to choose stay with us and share our fate, or return to your people and their safety. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her, some friendly, some hostile, all watching to see what she would say. Finally, her eyes found Aishan's, and she saw something there that gave her strength. I've already chosen, she said simply. This is my home now. These are my people. Whatever comes, I'll face it here. The crowd dispersed slowly, but not before Sarah saw several approving nods. As the evening returned to normal, Aishan approached her. You spoke well, he said quietly, but you know what you have committed to. Life with the Apache is not easy, especially for a white woman. Sarah smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Nothing worth having is easy. Besides, I have a good teacher. Aishan's smile in return was warm and genuine. Then, perhaps it is time to begin your real education. Chapter 3. The season of learning autumn came to the desert with subtle changes, cooler nights, different birds passing overhead, and a shift in the quality of light that painted the canyon walls in deeper shades of red and gold. Sarah had been with the Apache for almost 2 months now, and she was beginning to understand the rhythm of their lives, the way they moved with the seasons rather than fighting against them. Her hands had grown strong and skilled. The baskets she wove now were tight and beautiful, decorated with patterns that Itza had taught her. She could tan a hide properly, cook traditional foods, and had learned enough Apache to hold simple conversations. But more importantly, she had found her place in the community. The children had become her special responsibility. Every morning, after the communal meal, she would gather them by the stream for lessons. She taught them English letters by drawing in the sand, showed them how to write their names, and told them stories from the world beyond the canyon. In return, they taught her Apache legends, traditional songs, and the names of plants and animals. In their language, Teacher Sarah, little Nayeli, would call out, using the English words carefully. Tell us about the big water that touches the sky. Sarah would describe the ocean, something she had never seen herself but had read about in books. She would talk about ships and whales, about cities with buildings that reached toward the clouds. The children would listen with wide eyes, their imaginations carrying them to places far from the desert. But it was the older children who posed the real challenge. Boys like Nate, who was 15 and already training to be a warrior, would ask difficult questions. Why do your people want to put us on reservations? He asked one day, his young face serious. We have lived here since the beginning of time. This is our home. Sarah had learned to answer such questions honestly, even when the truth was painful, because they're afraid of you, and because they want the land for themselves. Fear makes people do terrible things. Are you afraid of us? Asked Hejia, a girl about 12 with intelligent eyes. Sarah considered the question carefully. I was. At first, but fear of the unknown is different from fear of something real. Once I got to know you, the fear went away. It was during one of these teaching sessions that Sarah noticed the riders approaching the canyon. She recognized the military bearing immediate soldiers, a full patrol of them, riding in formation toward the camp. Children, go to your mothers, she said quietly, trying to keep the alarm out of her voice. Quickly now, the children scattered, and Sarah hurried toward the center of camp where Nolnish and the other leaders were already gathering. Isa appeared at her side, his face grim. Army patrol, he said unnecessarily. 20 men, led by a lieutenant. Sarah's heart sank. She had known this day would come, had prepared herself for it, but the reality was still frightening. What do they want? What they always want, Ishan replied. To take us to the reservation. The patrol stopped at the edge of the camp, and Sarah was surprised to see how young the officer leading them was. Lieutenant James Morrison couldn't have been more than 25, with sandy hair and nervous eyes that darted constantly around the camp. Behind him, the soldiers sat there, horses with the rigid discipline of men who expected trouble. I am Lieutenant Morrison, the officer announced in a voice that carried clearly across the canyon. I'm here to speak with your leaders about the government's relocation program. Nolnish stepped forward, her dignity apparent even to the soldiers. I am Nolnish. I speak for my people. Say what you have come to say. Morrison's eyes flickered over the assembled Apache, and Sarah saw them widen slightly when they found her, a white woman in Apache clothing, standing among the warriors with obvious acceptance. It was not what he had expected to find. The United States government has established a reservation at San Carlos where your people can live in peace, Morrison began, the words sounding rehearsed. You will be provided with food, shelter, and protection. All you need to do is come, voluntarily, and if we refuse, Ishan asked, his voice deceptively mild. Morrison's jaw tightened. Then I will be forced to return with a larger force and escort you there myself. A murmur of anger ran through the gathered Apache. Sarah could feel the tension rising, the way men's hands moved closer to their weapons. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment when she would have to choose sides definitively. You, Morrison said suddenly, pointing at Sarah. You're white. What are you doing here? Sarah felt every eye in the camp turn to her. This was it the Nolnish had predicted. She could claim to be a captive, could ask for rescue, could return to the safety of white society, or she could stand with the people who had become her family. I live here, she said simply. These are my people. Morrison's face flushed with confusion and anger. Ma'am, I don't know what these savages have told you, but you're clearly being held against your will. I'm here to rescue you. I don't need rescuing, Sarah replied, her voice steady. I'm here by choice. That's impossible, Morrison snapped. No civilized white woman would choose to live among Apache by choice. You've clearly been coerced or worse. Sarah felt Ishan tense beside her, but she put a calming hand on his arm. Lieutenant, I am Sarah Mitchell, formerly of Philadelphia. I came west to teach school and was attacked by bandits who left me to die. These people saved my life and welcomed me into their community. I have never been happier or more at home, anywhere. Morrison stared at her as if she had sprouted horns. You single quotes You're choosing them over your own people. I'm choosing humanity over hatred, Sarah said firmly. I'm choosing a community that values wisdom, courage, and compassion over conquest and greed. The young lieutenant's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. Ma'am, you don't understand what you're saying. These people are hostile Indians. They're dangerous. The only danger I see here is a young man with a gun who thinks he has the right to tell a free people where they can live, Sarah replied, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. Morrison's hand moved to his sidearm, and immediately every Apache warrior in the camp tensed. Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between the soldiers and her adopted people. Lieutenant, she said quietly, you came here to talk, not to fight. Let's talk. For a moment, the canyon was so quiet that Sarah could hear the stream bubbling over stones. Then Morrison slowly moved his hand away from his weapon. Very well, he said stiffly, but I want it clear that I'm giving you people 30 days to consider the government's offer. After that, I'll be back with orders to escort you to San Carlos, willing or not. Nolnish stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of years. We will consider what you have said, Lieutenant, but understand this. We are not children to be moved around at the whim of distant men in Washington. We are a free people, and we will make our own decisions. Morrison's jaw worked as if he were chewing on bitter medicine. 30 days, he repeated, and ma'am, he added, looking at Sarah, if you change your mind, if you want to return to civilization, send word. It's not too late to come home. I am home, Sarah said simply. After the soldiers left, the camp erupted in discussion. Some voices called for immediate flight to the mountains, others for war. Sarah found herself in the center of a heated debate about what her presence might mean for the community's safety. They will use her as an excuse, Chatto argued, his old hostility returning. They will say we have kidnapped a white woman, that we are holding her against her will. Did you not hear her speak? Countered Itza. She defended us like a she-wolf defends her cubs. She is one of us now. Being one of us may not be enough, Nolnish said quietly, her words silencing the discussion. The world is changing, and we must change with it or be destroyed. That night, Sarah sat by the stream with Aishan, both of them lost in thought. The canyon was quiet except for the eternal sound of water over stones and the distant call of a night bird. What will you do? Sarah asked finally. When the soldiers come back, Aishan picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. We will do what we have always done, survive, but it will be harder now. The old ways are dying. Sarah, soon there will be no place left for people like us. Below in the canyon, the warriors were making their final preparations. Some had painted their faces for battle, others were checking their weapons one last time. The children huddled close to their mothers, their usual laughter replaced by the tense silence of fear. Sarah had spent the night in prayer not to the god of her childhood, but to the spirits of the desert that had become her protectors. She had asked for wisdom, for courage, and for the strength to do what was right, even if it meant sacrifice. Now, as the soldiers deployed at the canyon's mouth, she made her final decision. I'm going down to meet them, she announced. Sarah, no, Aishan said, appearing at her side. It is too dangerous. They will not listen to reason. They might listen to me, Sarah replied. I'm one of them, remember? If I can make them understand, ... And if you cannot, Itza asked. If they take you away? Sarah smiled sadly. Then at least I will have tried, and you will know that someone fought for you with words instead of bullets. She made her way down the canyon path, her heart hammering against her ribs. At the bottom, she found the Apache warriors arranged in a defensive line, their faces grim. With determination, Geronimo stood in the center, his rifle cradled in his arms, looking like a man prepared to die well. You should not be here, he said when he saw her. This is not your fight. With respect, Chief, it is my fight, Sarah replied. These people are my family now. Where they go, I go. Geronimo studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Very well, but understand if this goes badly, I will not be able to protect you. I understand, Sarah said, and I accept the risk. The soldiers had formed up in battle formation at the canyon's entrance, their carbines ready, their horses dancing nervously. At their head rode a man Sarah didn't recognize, an older officer, with the bearing of someone used to command. Behind him, she was surprised to see Lieutenant Morrison, looking even more nervous than before. This is Colonel Harrison, Morrison called out when he spotted the Apache line. He's here to escort you to the reservation. You will come peacefully, or you will come in chains. Sarah stepped forward, her white dress and auburn hair, making her clearly visible against the line of Apache warriors. Colonel Harrison, I am Sarah Mitchell. I believe you may have received some correspondence about the situation here. The colonel's eyes widened slightly when he saw her. Miss Mitchell? We were told you were being held captive. I am here by choice. Colonel, these people saved my life and welcomed me into their community. I have never been happier or more at home anywhere. Ma'am, I don't know what kind of influence these people have exerted over you, but you're clearly not thinking clearly. Civilized woman would choose to live among savages. Sarah felt a flash of anger at the casual use of that word, but she kept her voice level. Colonel, I am a teacher. I came west to educate children, and that is exactly what I have been doing. The children in this camp are bright, eager to learn, and hungry for knowledge. They are not savages, they are human beings with the same hopes and dreams as any other children. That may be, the colonel said dismissively. But they are also hostile Indians who have been raiding settlements and killing innocent people. No, Sarah said firmly. These people have been living peacefully in this canyon for months. They have not raided anyone or killed anyone. They are simply trying to survive on land that has been theirs for centuries. A murmur ran through the ranks of soldiers. Sarah could see doubt in some faces, confusion in others. These men had been told they were facing dangerous savages, but what they saw was a mixed group of men, women, and children, clearly prepared to defend their home but not eager for war. Miss Mitchell, the colonel said, his voice taking on a paternal tone, I understand you feel grateful to these people for saving your life, but you must understand that they cannot be allowed to remain here. The government has decided that all Apache must be relocated to the reservation for their own safety and the safety of white settlers, and if they refuse, Sarah asked, then they will be forced to comply, the colonel replied, by whatever means necessary. Sarah felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. This was it, the choice that would determine the fate of everyone in the canyon. She could step aside, let events take their course, and probably save her own life. Or she could make one final attempt to bridge the gap between two worlds. Colonel, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the canyon, I have a proposal. I'm listening, the colonel said, though his expression suggested he was merely being polite. Give me time to arrange a meeting between Apache representatives and Senator Dawes. He has expressed interest in finding alternatives to forced relocation. If we can negotiate a peaceful solution, one that allows these people to remain on their ancestral lands while still addressing the government's concerns, wouldn't that be better than a war that will cost lives on both sides? The colonel's face hardened. Miss Mitchell, I have my orders. These people are to be relocated to San Carlos, period. There is no room for negotiation. Then you're condemning them to death, Sarah said flatly. San Carlos is a desert wasteland where Apache people sicken and die. You're asking them to choose between a slow death on the reservation and a quick death fighting you here. They are savages. The colonel snapped, his patience finally exhausted. They do not get to choose. Now step aside, or I will have you arrested for interfering with military operations. Sarah felt something crystallize inside her, a clarity that cut through all her fears and doubts. She turned to face the Apache warriors, looking into the faces of people who had become her family. Then she turned back to the colonel. No, she said simply. I beg your pardon. I said no. I will not step aside. If you want to attack these people, you'll have to go through me first. The colonel's face went red with fury. Miss Mitchell, you are a white woman. You cannot side with savages against your own people. My people are the ones who stand with justice, Sarah replied. My people are the ones who protect children and defend the innocent. My people are the ones who believe that all human beings deserve to live free and unmolested on their own land. She walked forward, placing herself directly between the two forces. I am Sarah Mitchell, daughter of Thomas and Mary Mitchell of Philadelphia. I am a teacher, a Christian, and a citizen of the United States of America. And I am telling you, Colonel, that what you are about to do is wrong. It is morally wrong, legally questionable, and practically stupid. You are interfering with military operations, the Colonel said, his voice deadly quiet. That is treason. Then, I am a traitor, Sarah said without hesitation, and I am proud of it. A shocked silence fell over the canyon. Even the Apache warriors seemed stunned by her declaration. Sarah stood alone in the space between the two armies, a small figure in white facing down the might of the United States military. Last chance, Miss Mitchell, the colonel said. Step aside, or face the consequences. Sarah looked back at Aishan, seeing the love and pride in his eyes. She looked at Nolnish, seeing the dignity and wisdom that had first impressed her. She looked at the children she had taught, the women she had worked beside, the men who had accepted her as one of their own. I stand with my people, she said clearly, and my people are right here. The colonel raised his hand, about to give the order to charge, when a new voice cut through the tension. Colonel Harrison, you will stand down immediately. Everyone turned to see a small group of riders approaching from the east. At their head rode a man in civilian clothes, followed by what appeared to be a military escort. Sarah's heart leaped as she recognized the voice. It was Senator Dawes himself. Senator, the colonel said, clearly confused. What are you doing here? I am here because a very brave young woman wrote to me about the situation in this canyon, Dawes replied, dismounting from his horse. I am here because I believe there might be a better way to resolve this conflict than through bloodshed. He walked forward, his eyes taking in the scene. The Apache warriors prepared for battle, the army ready to attack, and Sarah standing between them like a bridge across a chasm. Miss Mitchell, I presume, he said, approaching her with a slight smile. Your letters were quite compelling. I felt I had to come and see for myself. Senator Dawes, Sarah said, relief flooding through her. I'm so glad you're here. These people don't want to fight. They just want to live in peace on their own land. I'm beginning to understand that, Dawes said. He turned to face the Apache warriors. I am Senator Henry Dawes of Massachusetts. I chair the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. I have come to talk, not to fight. Nulnish stepped forward, her dignity intact despite the circumstances. I am Nulnish, grandmother of this band. We will listen to your words, Senator. And I will listen to yours, Dawes replied respectfully. But first, Colonel Harrison, I need you to withdraw your men to a safe distance. There will be no violence here today. The colonel's face was a mask of frustration. Senator, I have orders which are superseded by my authority as chairman of the committee that oversees Indian affairs, Dawes said firmly. Withdraw your men, Colonel. That is an order. Reluctantly, the colonel signaled his troops to fall back. As the immediate threat of violence receded, Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. She had done it, she had bought them time. Over the next 3 days, Sarah found herself serving as an interpreter between two worlds. She helped translate not just languages, but cultural concepts, explaining Apache customs to the senator and American political realities to the Apache leaders. The negotiations were difficult, with moments when it seemed they might break down entirely. But gradually, with Sarah's help, a framework for agreement began to emerge. The Apache would be allowed to remain on a portion of their traditional lands, but would accept federal oversight and agree to send their children to school. In return, the government would provide medical care, agricultural assistance, and protection from hostile settlers. It wasn't perfect, no compromise ever is. But it was a beginning, a chance for two peoples to coexist rather than destroy each other. You did this, Ishan said to Sarah on the final night of negotiations. You saved us all. We did this, Sarah corrected. All of us together, Apache and white, working for something better than war. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the schoolhouse she had helped build at the edge of the canyon. It was a simple building, constructed of adobe and wood, but it represented something revolutionary, a place where Apache and white children could learn together, where two cultures could meet and find common ground. The school had become a symbol of the new arrangement, proof that coexistence was possible. Sarah taught reading and writing in both English and Apache, while Nulnish taught traditional stories and customs. The children thrived in this environment, becoming bridges between worlds just as Sarah had been. Miss Sarah, called out little Naeli, now confidently bilingual, will you tell us again about the big water that touches the sky? Sarah smiled, looking out at the eager faces Apache and white children sitting side by side, learning from each other. I'll tell you about the ocean, she said. But first, let me tell you about something even more amazing. Let me tell you about the power of understanding, about what happens when people choose to see past their differences to the humanity underneath. Outside the schoolhouse, the desert stretched endlessly under the vast Arizona sky. But inside, in the warm glow of oil lamps and the sound of children's laughter, Sarah had found her true calling. She had become what she had always been meant to be, a teacher, a bridge builder, a woman who had found her future in the most unexpected place. As the sun set over the canyon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been left tied to a tree to die, but an Apache warrior had cut her down and given her more than just life. He had given her a purpose, a family, and a love that transcended all boundaries. The future stretched ahead, full of challenges and possibilities. There would be setbacks, conflicts, and moments of doubt. But Sarah faced that future with confidence, knowing that she had found her place in the world and her role in building a better tomorrow for all children, regardless of the color of their skin or the language they spoke at home. She was no longer the frightened young woman who had come west to teach school. She was Sarah Mitchell, bridge builder, peacemaker, and proof that sometimes the most powerful weapon against hatred is simply the courage to love. The end.